Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the March 21st City Council meeting. And as a reminder, we are continuing to have a remote aspect to our meetings. Both staff and members of the public may be participating in tonight's meeting remotely via WebEx. Councilmember Ray has an excused absence this evening. So the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I welcome you all to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda this evening is audience comments, and members of the public may address council at this time in person or virtually. Those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first. If you are joining us virtually and you would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand, and you can do this on your phone by pressing *3. If you had joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. This can vary by device, and one option may be to go to the participant panel and choose the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner. If you're in the room and you did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing that portion of the meeting. City Clerk, has anyone signed up this evening to provide general audience comments or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
No one has signed up in advance to speak, and let me monitor to have one member of the public on with us. So I will wait to see if I see a raised hand. I don't see anyone indicating a desire to speak.
Thank you, City Clerk. So as a reminder for those that are watching and those that are here, written comments can be submitted at any time to your City Council by emailing to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. I'd like now to turn it over to Council President Walsh and see if there have been any emails that were submitted to Council and whether she could summarize them on tonight's agenda topics.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did not have any emails on tonight's agenda topics.
Thank you very much. The next item of business this evening is committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, Cascade Water Alliance will have their board meeting on the 23rd, and I understand Mayor Pauly will be attending that meeting. Also, we met with the Chamber Board on Friday, and they expressed some concern about the upcoming licensing bill that's going through the process right now with the Economic Vitality Board. I get them mixed up a little bit, thank you. And their concern is basically around the overbroad language that is in the statute concerning preventing a criminal offense on the property as being one of the reasons that their license could be pulled. So the administration certainly is well aware of that, and we're going to work on that language and see what we can do to make sure it's more concise and does meet the needs that have been expressed to us from our citizens and from our local retailers. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Joe. Next up is Councilmember DeMichelle.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. On March 10th, I attended the monthly Eastside Human Services Forum business meeting, followed immediately by committee work sessions. And this is the new Eastside Forum's new governance model, which appears to be working very well. We had a very, very good exchange of ideas between Eastside elected officials, so it appears to be a better format for achieving the forum's mission of serving as a convening organization focused on human services on the East Side. On March 11th, the Eastside Transportation Partnership held its monthly meeting. Attendees received briefings on the results of Metro's community engagement on East Link connections, as well as an overview of Eastside candidates for PSRC, Federal Highway Administration grant programs. Our own transportation engineering manager, John Mortensen, did a fantastic, great job of presenting the I-90 overpass project. And then on March the 16th, I attended the King County Regional Transit Committee meeting. There was a robust discussion of Metro's new safety, security, and fare enforcement, or SAFE, implementation report. The report, which was transmitted to the King County Council in February of this year, addresses a range of bus and transit center safety issues resulting from the pandemic, as well as systemic racism and disproportionate enforcement practices within the agency. The report is 200 pages in length with a wide range of proposed solutions, and presenters stress that the plan needs to be prioritized and continual community engagement will be part of the implementation. That said, concern was expressed by myself and every Eastside elected official about the urgency of the current situation and the need to tailor the implementation plan to the individual needs of urban, suburban, and rural Eastside cities. Anyone who is interested in getting a copy of that report, which is a very fascinating report, I would be happy to give them the link and get that to them so that they can read the SAFE report for themselves. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Councilmember Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 3 reports and 2 upcoming meeting announcements. Last Thursday, on March 17th, I attended the Salmon Recovery Council for ORA 8, which is the technical term for our watershed, and we had 2 discussion items. One was on integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion into salmon recovery and conservation, and we heard an update from the DEI subcommittee's work on this. Some of the actions that we're taking are revising grant materials to strengthen the DEI emphasis and incorporating DEI principles into our outreach materials, as well as strengthening connections with community organizations that focus on environmental justice and equity. We also reviewed and provided feedback on the themes and topics that we'll be working on in the Salmon Recovery Council for this next year. And one of the ones that I wanted to highlight for us this evening is that one of the things we will work on is to work with local government and community partners to integrate findings into local codes, regulations, and outreach and incentive programs. So this is part of the ongoing push to actually use the science that is being generated by the good work at the Salmon Recovery Council and get that best available science into our policy at the local level. We also have artificial light on that topic, and this is something that we are working on the Lake Sammamish to reduce artificial light there and potentially create a model program that would be used on other sites, both on Lake Sammamish and elsewhere. And then last Wednesday, on March 16th, I attended the King Conservation District Advisory Committee, and we discussed potential changes to KCD's member jurisdiction grant program. This is a program that Issaquah takes part in, and so do many other cities in our region and in the Sound Cities Association. One of the main changes that we talked about is that several years ago, both equity and evaluation elements were removed from the grant process, and so we, as a committee, are looking to how we can integrate those elements back into the grant process and make them meaningful, but also not burdensome on cities, because this is a very important grant program for the cities that are within the King Conservation District Advisory, or within the King Conservation District. So we will be making recommendations back to the group, and potentially these recommendations will then go to the Public Issues Committee once we have finalized those, since they affect so many cities. And then March 11th, Mayor Polly and I attended a special training event on Indigenous land acknowledgements. This was a training that was organized for elected officials that are serving in the K4C Outreach Committee. K4C stands for King County Cities Climate Collaborative. And we found this training to be very valuable, and we had a subsequent meeting with city staff, and I think that city staff will take our feedback, and also they have been working on this issue as well, and so I expect that this will come back to council with recommendations about how we can improve and do land acknowledgements differently in the future using lessons learned. And then 2 upcoming meetings. This Wednesday, I will attend the Kokanee ILA Management Committee, Kokanee Interlocal Agreement Management Committee. Kokanee are a special kind of endangered salmon. And so we will have 2 main items, update on Kokanee returns and reviewing the 2023 ILA budget. And then lastly, the Council Rules Ad Hoc Committee will meet at 2 p.m. on Wednesday the 30th. This will be the first meeting of that group. And we will report out after that meeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board will next meet Thursday, April 7th from 10 till noon. That agenda is still being determined. The Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee, however, did meet Wednesday, March 9th from 7 till 9, still meeting online. No actions were taken, but I will point out to my fellow council members that first time in 2 years, SCA is having a networking event. This is an awesome opportunity to get to break bread with your fellow elected officials and find out the secrets of how they do what they do. Again, Wednesday, March 30th, 6 to 8 p.m. in the Renton Pavilion. And Juliana, with the mayor's office, can help us with the registration. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. Just really quickly to announce that the next meeting of the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors is scheduled for Thursday, April 14th at 4 p.m. in person at the EFR headquarters, which is our first in-person board meeting in a very long time. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
That's great news. Council President Walsh.
Thank you. I also just have a meeting announcement. The next Affordable Housing Committee meeting is on Friday, April 8th at 1:30 p.m. Still virtual, and no agenda's been released at this time.
Thank you, Council President. Next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. There will be an executive session this evening to discuss property acquisition per RCW 42.30.220 paren 1 paren B and pending and potential litigation per RCW 42.30.220 paren 1 paren I. The items are expected to take approximately 20 minutes, and action is anticipated to follow an open session. 2 weeks ago, we raised the Ukrainian flag at Issaquah City Hall, and we continue to mourn the loss of life in Ukraine and to condemn Russia's unjustified invasion. If you wish to send financial support to those in Ukraine, USAID at the State Department recommends sending cash donations to reputable relief organizations working on the ground. USAID's webpage on the Ukraine crisis provides links to over 23 international organizations responding in Ukraine. I hope that you will use the list and the other information on this page to encourage city residents, businesses, and other organizations to support the people and the leaders of Ukraine. If you take a glance over at the far right-hand side of our chamber this evening, you will see a beautiful blanket. I want to talk a little bit about that. I am so very honored that our city has received this blanket from the Snoqualmie tribe on behalf of the city of Issaquah. Last year, the Snoqualmie Tribe Vaccination Clinic was made possible through the partnership between the Snoqualmie Tribe, a sovereign nation, and the city of Issaquah, Eastside Fire and Rescue, and the city of Sammamish. Over 200 volunteers came together to provide service to our community. These volunteers contributed their time over a 52-day period with a combined total of 4,100 volunteer hours. In recognition of our successful partnership, the Snoqualmie Tribe presented us with this blanket created by 8th Generation. Thank you, Snoqualmie Tribe, for this beautiful and meaningful gift. It is an honor to accept it and to display it in our community. We plan to display the blanket in various community spaces throughout the year. Last week, I met with a chapter of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to learn about opportunities for collaboration in emergency situations. One resource that emerged from this meeting was Just Serve, which is a website used by faith, nonprofit, community, and government organizations to post service opportunities. I encourage you to join me in spreading the word about this free community resource. And coming up is our 2021 Community, I forgot that date, right? 2022 Community Awards Ceremony. As a reminder, Issaquah will soon present its honored Hall of Fame Award. Please join us as we honor the recipient at the Chamber of Commerce's annual Issaquah Community Awards event on March 31st at 6 p.m. The event is virtual and free to attend, but registration is required. You can learn more about this on the Issaquah Chamber Commerce website. And I was just going to go through a few fun activities that are happening in town. Kiwanis will be hosting the Boots, Barrels, and Brews. Kiwanis Club is hosting a country-themed event featuring live country music, food, beverages, dessert, a raffle, and line dance lessons. Bring your boots and join the Kiwanis Club at Pickering Barn from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. on Friday. Advance tickets are $45 per person or $55 the day of and include 3 drinks, brats, and more. Participants must be 21 years or older. And for more information, please visit bootsbarrelsandbrews.com. We also have a farm fresh market going on. Downtown Issaquah Association is hosting a market with seasonal flowers and food at the historic Shell Station. The event will run on Saturdays from March 26th through April 30th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And Cascade Alliance is running a Gardener Spring Series, Gardening for Wildlife. Cascade Water Alliance is sponsoring a free webinar on March 26th at 10 a.m., and participants will learn lower maintenance gardening techniques that attract wildlife. Registration is required through brown paper tickets. And finally, just want to let everybody know that City Hall is currently open to the public Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's anticipated that open hours will resume on Monday through Friday schedule beginning on April 11th. And that concludes the mayor's report. The next item of business for us this evening is the consent calendar. And the consent calendar was distributed to council in advance. If authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved in one motion. Have the payables and payrolls been reviewed?
Yes.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Is there somebody prepared to make a motion?
Yes.
Council President?
Thank you. I would like to move to approve the consent calendar as written in our agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's go for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? How come I went off? Still learning the microphones. Okay. The next item of business this evening is regular business, AB 8355. It's a statement regarding the war on Ukraine. The ask before the council this evening is to adopt this resolution. And I'd like to invite Human Services Manager Monica Negrilla to make a presentation. We also have Equity Board member Tony is here with us this evening, Tony Curry, and he will also be joining Monica for a portion of the presentation. Welcome, Monica. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor, and members of the council. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. It's so nice to see you all in person. So yes, as Mayor said, I'm Monica Negrilla. I'm the Human Services Manager. I'm also the staff liaison to the Equity Board. And in person here with me tonight is Tony Curry, the Vice Chair of the Equity Board. Also online with us, it's the Chair of the Equity Board, Shay Fleming. I think she might be still in the attendee section. Thank you, Tisha. There might be some other Equity Board members in the attendee section or watching online. So thank you again for having us. And so tonight, before I'm going to invite Tony here to read the statement, just want to say a few words. We are here to seek your authorization to approve a statement proposed by the Equity Board regarding the war in Ukraine. And so our hope is that you will consider and approve the resolution that is with the statement. And so I think with that, I'm just going to invite Tony to read the statement for you.
Shay, thank you for coming too. I didn't mean to miss you. Welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Monica. Esteemed council, Madam Mayor, my name is Tony Curry. I'm the Vice Chair of the Equity Board. I'm glad to be here meeting everyone in person, so thank you for having me. So the Equity Board would like to recommend to City Council the adoption of the following statement regarding the war in Ukraine. So it aligns with our feelings in the Equity Board about, of course, equity we're passionate about, as well as justice for all. The City of Issaquah's Equity Board is heartbroken to learn of the atrocities in Ukraine. As we have seen in international news, millions of Ukrainians have left their country seeking refuge, and an additional 2 million are internally displaced, while thousands of Russian allies have been arrested for protesting the war in Russia. Knowledge of profane, horrific war crimes committed against Ukrainian civilians, as well as inhumane practices of racism and bigotry committed against South Asians and Africans attempting to flee alongside Ukrainian citizens, have been worrisome. Our Equity Board stands for justice, fair, and equitable treatment for all of humanity. The mission of the board is to unify our community. Therefore, condemnation of these actions comes with the understanding that our outrage is against the war and not against the Russian community. As we lift our voices, our hearts, and our minds in support of our fellow neighbors, we call upon the community of Issaquah to stand up for justice, stand up for peace. We call on the community to stand up for equity in our homes, our places of business, and our places of worship, to help where our heart leads us, lend a gentle, peaceful voice where our mind takes us, and extend a helping hand to our community. Now I'm going to reintroduce Monica to talk about ways you can help or resources.
Thank you so much, Tony. So, City Council, in addition to the statement recommended by the board also thought that it would be nice to add a call to action where community members can really take some actionable steps. And there are 3 that they're proposing, and I know that Shay would like to join us in sharing those 3 resources. Shay?
Hello, Monica, and thank you for introducing me. Hello, Mayor Polly and fellow City Council members. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and thank you, Tony, for taking the time to read that statement. You did a wonderful job, so thank you so much. So essentially, we wanted to propose a few options that people would have in order to help them through determining some reliable resources in order to make donations or to show their support. So following Exhibit B of the actual statement, we're going to also offer an option for some reliable resources that they can use related to financial support, volunteerism, and voicing their support for helping folks who are leaving, refugees in Ukraine, that are leaving Ukraine or still there.
Thank you very much, Shay. So with that, in summary, the 3 areas, in addition to supporting community members in Ukraine, residents may also choose self-care options, especially for mental health, and also they may choose to learn more about racism across the globe and how it is portrayed, and the war is portrayed in the media. So with that, council members, the administration recommends for you to approve the resolution that would adopt the statement. Of course, as options, you always have the option to adopt it, which we hope that you would. You also always have the option not to adopt it or to make recommendations for us to consider a different option. We are available for questions with that. Thank you so much again for having us.
Thank you. Any questions? I have a process question. Do you want the council to take the vote and then to read the proclamation, or do you want the proclamation read prior to the council taking a vote? Prior. Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's get Tony back up then.
Okay. Whereas on February 24th, 2022, Russia began a military invasion of Ukraine. And whereas millions of Ukrainians have left their country seeking refuge, and an additional 2 million are internally displaced, while thousands of Russian allies have been arrested for protesting the war in Russia. And Whereas knowledge of profane, horrific war crimes committed against Ukrainian citizens, as well as inhumane practices of racism and bigotry committed against South Asians and Africans attempting to flee alongside Ukrainian citizens have been worrisome. And whereas the City of Issaquah Equity Board met on March 14, 2022, and recommended that the City Council adopt a statement regarding the war on Ukraine. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Issaquah, Washington hereby resolves as follows. Section 1, Statement on the War in Ukraine. The City of Issaquah believes in justice, fair, and equitable treatment for all of humanity. Therefore, condemnation of these actions comes with the understanding that our outrage is against the war and not against the Russian community. As we lift our voices, our hearts, and our minds in support of our fellow neighbors, we call upon the community of Issaquah to stand up for justice, stand up for peace. We call on the community to stand up for equity in our homes, our places of business, and of worship, to help where our heart leads us, lend a gentle, peaceful voice to where our mind takes us, and extend a helping hand to our community. Section 2, Informational resources on the way to help, receive support, and further learn are provided in Exhibit A to the resolution, and hopefully passed on City Council this day of 2022.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Is there a motion? Council President.
Thank you. I would move to approve resolution number
2022-07.
2022-07, adopting a statement on the war in Ukraine as recommended by the Equity Board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Go to Councilmember Joe, followed by Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the work the Equity Board has done on this. It's very well stated, and I want to point out a couple of things that I think are important. It calls on our fellow neighbors to take action, and the list you provided is excellent. It's a way that we can reach out and help as we feel helpless sitting there watching the newsreel going over and over again. Also, I like the fact that it points out that the statement is concerned about the war going on, but not condemning the Russian people at all. And I appreciate that because after Pearl Harbor, my Japanese-American family was, of course, interned in Minidoka. But before that happened, they lost their businesses. No one came to shop at their stores. They were generally shunned. So what I would like for us to also think about is continuing to frequent places that serve Russian food, Russian businesses, businesses that are owned by our Ukrainian friends as well. Those are the people that have come over to America under the promise and guise of building a better life, and those are the people that we certainly need to support in this time of such stress in our community. So again, I compliment the Equity Board on this fine piece of work, and I look forward to voting yes for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joe. Councilmember Martz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll also be supporting this resolution this evening. When extraordinary situations arise, there are sometimes questions in the community why municipalities get involved in these sort of issues. But I think it's obvious in what we've seen over the last month that some of the response in the world has just been a visceral reaction at the community level in seeing what's happened in Eastern Europe. And I think that local leaders can have a role in sustaining and validating and supporting those sorts of reactions that influence. I've been struck by generally the bipartisan nature of the response here in the United States, and it seems to have brought us together, at least temporarily, in a way that we haven't been in quite some time. And hopefully it will get resolved in the spectrum of resolutions that can happen at the more peaceful end, but certainly a consistent and bipartisan and overwhelming statement of support and continued support for the Ukrainian people will help us resolve it or help them resolve it at the more peaceful end of the spectrum rather than the less peaceful end. So to the extent that we as a community can be a small but enthusiastic part of forming that response, then it is a real honor to be able to be part of it. So thank you for this resolution.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Deputy Council President Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Polly. I just want to reread one section again. To help where our heart leads us, lend a gentle, peaceful voice to where our mind takes us, and extend a helping hand to our community. Wow. Really, really well written. I want to thank our Equity Board for their thoughtful recommendation and their ability to speak to the best in people. It's clear to me that the actors behind the Russian invasion of Ukraine have a lot to learn from leaders like you. And with that in mind, I'm in strong support. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember DeMichelle?
Thank you, Mayor Polly. I want to commend the Equity Board for bringing this resolution before us.
We can help you out.
Can-
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Sherry.
There we go. So, following up on Councilmember Martz's comments, I didn't really struggle, but I did consider over the weekend why I, as an elected official in a small city in Western Washington, not responsible for foreign policy or defense, would vote for this resolution. But I do think that there is a bedrock reason why elected officials should support a resolution of this kind. The Ukrainians have made it abundantly clear over several decades while enduring earlier invasions, participating in elections, and thwarting attempts to install a puppet government that they do not want to be governed by the nation of Russia. And it goes to the heart of the right of people to choose their government freely and fairly. This aspect of the war against Ukraine is one reason why nearly the entirety of the world, including many nations with not so perfect human rights records, are standing against the nation of Russia. Those elected officials, including myself, who enjoy the support of an electorate that freely chooses its leaders through fair and free elections, should condemn the nation of Russia's attempt to rule a people through violence, fear, suppression of the vote, silencing of communications, destruction of property, and the killing and maiming of innocent soldiers and civilians. And I say innocent soldiers and as well as innocent civilians because the Ukrainians didn't ask for this war, they didn't start this war, and they have every right to defend themselves against it. I also want to comment, as Councilmember Joe did, some may find it controversial that the resolution does not explicitly condemn the Russian people. We had a very similar situation on September 11th, 2001, when the United States was attacked by hijacked airplanes piloted by Muslim pilots. From President Bush in his speech on September 12th to here in Issaquah on the very day of the attack, steps were taken to protect our Muslim residents from harm. Similarly, there should be no reason to turn against people of Russian descent or people who have immigrated here from Russia during this period of international turmoil. And I too, as members of my own extended family, suffered from the incarceration of Americans of Japanese descent following Pearl Harbor. We must ensure over and over that those kinds of overreactions never happen again. I absolutely commend the Equity Board for calling it out and making it very explicit in your statement, and I will proudly support this resolution.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a quick comment I want to add at the end, but I just want to make sure you see a chance. Okay. It is so nice to see the two of you. I only see you on video when I'm snooping in on your meetings, but I just wanted to tell you from past practice, our administration, our city, frequently adopted the words of others and tweaked it a little bit to have the Issaquah flavor to it. You wrote this from your hearts. It's fantastic. It gave the council an opportunity to really reflect on what you said. It's fantastic, and it's actionable. Thank you for making it more than just words. Thank you for making it actionable. So great job, Shay. Tony, thank you guys for coming tonight. Appreciate it. And now we'll get back to the motion at hand, which is to approve resolution number 2022-07, adopting a statement on the war in Ukraine as recommended by the Equity Board. It's been moved and seconded. Any additional council discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you so much. The next item of business this evening, we have two items that are in tandem. We have AB 8338, which is the 2021-2022 budget reauthorizations, and AB 339, which is the first 2022 budget amendment. The action before the council this evening is to adopt the ordinance. And I'd like to have Senior Budget Analyst Susie Monsell start with the presentation. I see Susie on the camera.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. I had to remind myself how to share in WebEx. Thank you, Mayor Pauly. Good evening. I am Susie Monsell. I'm the Senior Budget Analyst, and I am here tonight to give a brief presentation on the 2021 to 2022 budget reauthorizations, as well as the first 2022 budget amendment. So this presentation will address both items, the reauthorizations of certain funds previously budgeted in 2021 for expenditure in 2022, as well as the first 2022 budget amendment. And this follows a similar process that we've utilized in the past, where the two items are proposed in one agenda or in two agenda bills, but action is taken on both of those ABs by way of just the one ordinance. So starting with the proposed 2021 to 2022 reauthorizations, since this is a process that is only undertaken once a year, we wanted to start with a very brief refresher on what reauthorizations are and really what they aren't. So reauthorizations are, for all intents and purposes, annual budgetary housekeeping. They are one-time items that are budgeted and approved in the prior year, in this case 2021, but were not able to be completed or spent by year end. So eligible items include primarily capital projects or one-time operating programs or projects that have a clear end point. So typical operating expenses such as personnel costs or anything intended to be an annual activity is not eligible for reauthorization. In terms of why the proposed reauthorizations were not able to be completed by year-end 2021, we placed each proposed item into various, what I'm calling rationale buckets. So these buckets include staff capacity, which is primarily due to vacancies or delays in other projects that caused a delayed start and the proposed reauthorizations. It includes supply chain delays, so primarily items that were ordered in 2021, but due to supply chain issues were not able to be delivered before the end of the year. But this category may also include construction projects that encountered shortages in materials or equipment. The COVID-related delays are primarily delays of community engagement efforts due to the pandemic, or reduced staffing capacity from outside organizations that resulted from the pandemic, as opposed to our own internal staff capacity. And multi-year projects are projects that were intended to be conducted over multiple years, but were originally budgeted under one calendar year, primarily to capture the acceptance of grant funding, to kind of carry those expenditures along with the grant funding. And in the meeting packet for this item, we included a matrix listing in which bucket each of the proposed reauthorizations fall. And it's important to note that some items may fall into more than one bucket, depending on the particular circumstances. And this table summarizes the total amount of the proposed reauthorizations by fund. And since there is a lot of material provided in the packet for tonight's meeting, we will not be going through each item as part of the presentation tonight. But as you can see from this table, the vast majority of the proposed reauthorizations are capital projects in the capital project fund, the IT fund, and the utility funds. And as you'll also see, there are some revenue reauthorizations as well. And these represent reimbursement type grants where the city has not received the revenue backing the expenditures that are requesting the reauthorization. So once that work is performed, the city can then bill the grants to receive that revenue. So this follows past practice, ensuring that we're monitoring the revenue that is still anticipated to support these expenditures. Shifting now to the proposed first 2022 budget amendment. Like amendments proposed to the council in the past, these requests are grouped into 3 categories. There are previously approved requests or items that were already approved, at least in concept, by the city council via other agenda bills. And this amendment includes 6 previously approved items. The budget corrections are items that are really just technical corrections to the 22 adopted budget that were identified subsequent to the city council adopting the budget, but do not constitute a policy change. And this budget amendment contains 6 budget corrections. And finally, budget adjustments represent new projects or activities that were not included in the 22 adopted budget. And this amendment contains 9 budget adjustments. This table summarizes the total amount of the proposed amendments by fund. And again, since there is a lot of material provided in the packet for tonight's meeting, we will not be going through each item as part of the presentation tonight. But as you can see from the table, this amendment includes both revenue and expenditures across numerous city funds. But again, the full list of items included in this proposed amendment are included in the packet, along with brief summaries of each item. And to close out this overview presentation, this table summarizes the impact to the general fund specific fund balance should the council approve these reauthorizations and amendments as proposed. And as a reminder, the 22 adopted budget at the time of adoption anticipated a 19% undesignated ending fund balance as a percent of expenditures, and with the city's financial policy setting a 15 to 20% target. And we closed the books on 2021 just last week. So we will be returning to the council in April for a more in-depth analysis of 2021 financials. But generally, we will be adding to general fund balance over what was forecast in October. So when these reauthorizations and amendments are taken into account for 2022, we'd now be estimating ending 2022 with a 26% undesignated fund balance as a percent of expenditures. So we provide this here mostly to demonstrate that the adoption of these items would not be dipping us below 15% financial policy. But again, we'll be returning next month for a detailed overview of the 2021 financials. And that ends my formal presentation, but I am happy to take any questions that the council may have.
Looking for questions, either on the presentation or the package materials. Just for fun, come on, one at least. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. I think this is a question that probably would best be answered by Director Watling if he is available. I'm not sure. But I had sent this question. It's regarding some of the budget amendments that are the actual changes, so not the corrections, but the budget adjustment items. And several of them have to do with the park master planning funding that was previously going to go into planning and is now going into projects. And so I guess my question is around that, and what is the plan then for the master parks plan going forward?
Thanks. I'm not sure if we have do we have Director Watling? Fantastic. We can't see him on our screen yet. Hi, nice to see you, Jeff. I'm sure you were able
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for making me a panelist. Thank you, Councilmember Hunt, for the earlier question. Just to, I guess, reiterate my email response. Yeah, within the reauthorizations, there are specific requests for park master planning. This is in coordination with Finance Department and to complete the three master planning efforts that we initiated pre-pandemic. Those, as you recall, were master planning efforts for Tibbetts Valley Park, Veterans Memorial Park, and the Issaquah Creek Corridor. This reauthorization request also breaks that funding out into those specific projects. Any future master planning would need to be a separate budget request in the future, but this request is really pertaining to completing the work that was interrupted or that we paused due to the pandemic, and not necessarily feeling like it was the right time to have this level of community engagement these last 2 years.
Do you want to ask a backup?
Yeah, I think, so thank you for that. I think my question, I wasn't specific enough, but I think my question is more not about the reauthorization, but about, it's item 16 in the budget adjustment item. So this is where it says the 2021 budget included $185,000 for park master planning, and then through its planning efforts, now these will be better allocated to 2 park capital projects. So is that we now expect that the master parks planning will cost less, and so that money is no longer needed for that, but can go towards these capital projects?
Not necessarily. This would be part of, again, taking that planning work and budgeting it specifically to the capital project, the site-specific capital project.
I think that confusion, Director Watling, is it going to construction or continued planning? Are we separating them into 2 projects and using it for the planning, not the construction?
Thank you for that, Mayor. It is going for first completing the planning work that needs to be done.
Okay, so I think, so my question is really if we're deviating from the plan, because and it sounds like this is not really deviating from the plan, but rather specifying within the plan where these funds will go as part of the reauthorization. Does that sound correct?
That is correct. As we move this reauthorization forward and did our work with finance, correct.
I think in our original presentations to council, these came as a package. Now it's time to just call them each their own thing. But that was a great question.
Okay,
what was the intent? Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Susie. Thank you, Jeff. Is there a motion? Council President Hunt?
I move to adopt ordinance number
2970.
2970, reauthorizing the remaining 2021 funds for certain projects and amending the 2022 budget as set forth in ordinance number 2961 concerning revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for various funds.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hall, Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pauly. Very quick comments as always. Susie, you're a rock star. I want to thank you very much for opting to give us lots of information here. It was super helpful as we prepared for the meeting over the weekend. I'm happy to support this ordinance tonight, but just for the record, I would like to learn more about how we can do a better job phasing multi-year capital projects when we budget. It seems to me that reauthorizing this much funding authority could be avoided, at least in part, if we describe the phase or the scope of work we hope to accomplish in a given year. So if possible, I was hoping the administration could include something about this in our April briefing on the biennial budget process, which I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm sure everyone else on council is too. So if it's possible to include that in that would be great. And thank you again, Susie, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Hall. Any other comments? Council President?
Thank you. Gosh, I have very similar comments coming through, but I really appreciate the detailed list of the items and how it was broken down, giving the reason for the delay. I think my first reaction in looking at $28 million worth of reauthorizations was to panic and go, oh my goodness, what are we doing? Having gone through that list, I understand the rationale and how somewhat this year is different, and I appreciated pointing that out. But as Deputy Council President Hall said, some of this happens to us every year. And it doesn't just happen to us on capital projects. It also happens to us on operations budget and staffing. And so I too think as a city, we need to get better at spending what is allocated. And this, this comes up particularly because these were such large budget items, and so it's very important. I guess I would just say, if we can't do this well, how can the community expect us to hold ourselves accountable for effective budgeting, project management, and responsive governing? This is the core of what we do, and we need to get better at it, whether it's at a department level of understanding how much we can get done, whether it's at a financial management level of taking on, phased projects and understanding how we can do that. So I will absolutely support this agenda bill. I think it states the things that we want to continue doing and that we weren't able to get done last year. But I really, as we go into this biennial budget, I really want to see a way that we can handle this both for capital projects and operations budget, so that we are doing a very diligent job and checking in regularly on what we budgeted, what we were able to spend, what we have left over, and how we're going to manage that so that we don't get to budgets or budget reauthorization and go, we have this big pot of money. It doesn't need to be that way. Thank you.
Great. City Administrator Bob Quitz. When I was first on council, I was absolutely floored that months after we did a budget that we were asked to do a reauthorization or a reallocation. And I spent a lot of time with Director Marcotte at the time trying to understand why it's different than my world, which was private sector. I think it would be good when we talk about the biannual budget that we bring in some practices and norms for municipal governments, because reallocations and reauthorizations do occur in all cities. And for example, if we were to buy a project that was $54 million, which we wouldn't, but if we did, you would have a budget authorization for that amount. And so I think what we can take this opportunity to do is say, council wants us to be as efficient and thorough in spending what's been allocated. That's very clear. But in terms of setting the goal at not having significant allocations, that may be beyond the capability of what we can provide. So let's take time during that 2-year budget discussion and go through some of that so that we kind of know what the norm in municipal practice is, and we try and stay within that boundary. I think that would be helpful. Okay, any other comment? Councilmember Mertz.
Thank you. In having watched this for 13 years, we always don't spend as much as we plan on spending. And so at some point, if we're really serious about being deterministic on our spend, we have to look at doing something different. And an example would be, if you're shooting at a target and you're always shooting right where the target is, by the time your bullet gets to it, the target is moved, so you're always lagging, right? So what you do is you shoot ahead. And you can do that, right? You can do that with budgets. We talk about 16 to 20% or 15 to 20%. If you really want to get to under 20%, you probably have to actually shoot for a number that's quite a bit lower. And so the question is, there's risks associated with that, because heaven forbid the one time that you actually get it accurate. So I guess what I'm saying is I share the council president's concern. I've always said that keeping, I don't lose any sleep if we're between like 20 and 25% on ending fund balance, but north of 25%, I start to feel like I maybe I'm not doing my job right. So as we go to do this biennial budget process, I love the idea of hearing how other municipalities do it. And see if there's a way to be a little bit more deterministic and to drive that number to a value where we feel like we're running a little bit leaner.
That is a great point. And also to take into consideration what the Capital Financing Task Force said, which is maybe you want to consider pushing the bar down to 15 and actually planning project spend between a certain percentage, and that definitely might be one way to gain that edge that you're talking about. I agree with you. I think the reserve should cover us in an emergency, but when it's excessive, the people that are here deserve to have things that they've paid taxes for. So great points all around. Any other comments before we go to the vote? Great, I will reread. It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance number 29-70, reauthorizing remaining 2021 funds for certain projects and amending the 2022 budget as set forth in ordinance number 2961 concerning revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for various funds. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That carries unanimously, 6-0. Just a question for the clerk. The one ordinance does cover both of the ABs, so there's no additional motion. Thank you. The next item of business tonight is good of the order. And if you have an item for good of the order, please let me know. And as you're thinking about it, I'll talk about some upcoming meetings. March 29th is a special study session with the Title 18 Land Use Code, Natural Environment Review, and amending IMC 5.02 business licenses. April 4th is a regular council meeting with potential agenda items including amending IMC 5.02 business licenses. And is there any others for good of the order? Seeing none. As earlier announced, there will be an executive session held this evening to discuss property acquisition per RCW 42.30, .220(1)(b) and pending potential litigation per RCW 42.30, .220(1)(i). The items are expected to take approximately 20 minutes, and action is anticipated to follow in open session. As a reminder, executive sessions are closed to the public, and we will now recess into executive session at 7:57 p.m. For those participating virtually, anyone who's not part of the closed session will remain in the main meeting, and you are welcome to stay until the meeting is reconvened. Looks like we are. Thank you, City Clerk. So we are back out of executive session at 8:15 p.m. And is someone prepared to make a motion?
Do we want to receive, oh, excuse me, that's for the next one. Yes, I would like to move to postpone the motion regarding the ORA Talus settlement agreement to a special meeting on Tuesday, March 29th at 8:30 p.m. or immediately following the study session occurring that evening, whichever is later.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of moving it to the March 29th meeting at 8:30 or immediately following the study session occurring that evening, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously, 6-0. On the second item, is there a motion?
Yeah.
There's a brief staff presentation before we have a motion. Director Watling, glad you're here.
Mayor, thank you so much. Good evening, Council. Jeff Watling, Parks and Community Services Director. Happy to provide a quick staff report. Forgive me as I transition to sharing my screen here. As we've had the opportunity to provide an overview for you of a strategic acquisition opportunity, I want to take the time here to present this publicly and seek your authorization to authorize the mayor to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for this parcel. As the city has sought a strategic acquisition approach, one of the clear goals of both the mayor and you, City Council, have been to seek acquisitions that have multiple benefits. The property before you is a 20-acre piece on the northeast corner of Squaw Mountain. It's been known in the community as Squaw Mountain Estates. This 20-acre piece does meet numerous acquisition goals that we have within various planning documents. Certainly from a park trails and open space standpoint, this 20-acre piece really provides an opportunity to serve as a gateway into the public lands to the south of us, Squak Mountain State Park, and some really important and opportunistic trail connections there. Environmentally, clearly one of our goals as a city is to look at protecting forested hillsides and where we have opportunities to protect the urban forest and certainly ensure healthy open space wildlife habitat. This property certainly meets numerous environmental goals. The recent Climate Action Plan also calls for goals preserving tree canopy and as well supporting healthy climate in a number of ways that this 20 acres would provide opportunity to do that. As well, this 20-acre piece with Cabin Creek being on this site, as well as its adjacency, near adjacency to the main stem of Issaquah Creek. By preserving forested hillsides, there is certainly benefit to the watershed and salmon and habitat protection goals within RIA 8's goals. A little bit of an overview of the site itself. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 20-acre piece that really is on and serves as the northeast edge of Squak Mountain as it touches the city of Issaquah. As I said earlier, it's adjacent to Squak Mountain State Park to the south of us. As we've explored this acquisition, we've been in contact with state parks a number of times. They not only support this potential land acquisition, but also would support the opportunity for a more direct trail connection from our city system into the trail system on that state park property. As that connection we feel is so opportunistic in that we could then create a connection from the state park through this site and connect to Old Town via the Mine Hill Trail and the Squak Mountain Access Trail that currently both already exist. We began discussions with the owner last summer through a series of conversations through these months, as well as an appraisal that was completed, a number of conversations around negotiation. We have reached this point, and as we've updated you in executive session, that the owner is certainly ready and agrees upon a purchase to the city for $2.5 million. A little bit about the funding strategy itself. This $2.5 million could be achieved with existing city funds, existing budgeted funds that the city has for acquisition. Thank you, Council. I would be remiss not to mention both the mayor and council, your support since 2019 within our capital budget of investing or placing some acquisition dollars each year so that knowing that conversations and negotiations and opportunities for acquisition sometimes take multiple years, and having the opportunity with existing funds to consider these acquisitions is certainly a proactive and strategic move. So appreciate that. The funding itself in this case would be some existing King County Conservation Futures Grant funds, coupled with an additional King County Conservation Futures grant that we're going to pursue this year. As you may recall, with King County Conservation Futures grant funding, they pay up to 50% of a purchase. So we're seeking $1.25 million of the 2.5 from that grant funding source. The city also has an open space mitigation fund amount of $250,000 that, as we've discussed with finance, needs to be spent on an acquisition and needs to be spent by the end of this year. So that's funding that could go towards this acquisition, leaving $1 million that would come from, as I mentioned earlier, that capital project PK012, some existing city funds that are in that budget. I note also in the funding strategy, there's about $10,000 in closing costs that would be covered in combination with the King County grant and some additional PK012 funds. Something else we wanted to explore and provide an overview on is estimated operations and maintenance costs from this acquisition. Should we proceed with this acquisition, we estimate about $8,000 a year in maintenance as an undeveloped site. We also see opportunities with our recently formed Green Issaquah initiative, opportunities for some potential stewards, maybe multiple stewards on key areas of this parcel that could certainly assist with ongoing maintenance and understory management. Should we consider future phase trail work, at least initial some trail maintenance, we estimated about $5,000 a year as we would work with, should we purchase this, as we work with community planning and development. There are some existing roadways that were built into this site that provide a terrific series of loops. Should those be converted to trails on an interim basis, we would see that maintenance investment about $5,000 a year. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Both of those estimated maintenance costs we feel like we could absorb within our operating budget. Should we in the future pursue more formal trail development, or when we pursue more formal trail development on this site, with that capital budget request for that trail work, we would also work on any additional anticipated O&M in more of a developed state for this site. A couple of quick slides or quick visuals. This is a visual. Thank you to Brian in our GIS department working with Jennifer Fink, our park planner. It's a visual that looks a little different direction. This is looking southwest, just showing a little bit of the topography and really this important connection from the state park property, which is just south of us, down into the city. You'll notice south of Sunrise is the Kokari development. This is where the Squaw Mountain Access Trail would join into this site. Last slide is just a couple of visuals we wanted to share with you as we've been out on site with both the environmental consultant doing the level 1 environmental as well as the owner. The site is really, from a forest health standpoint, relatively very healthy. Not a lot of invasive understory. A visual there of Cabin Creek. The big picture on the right is a view looking south towards Squaw Mountain State Park. There is, just given the topography, some real opportunities for, despite the terrain on this site and the state park site, but some real terrific opportunities to work with some easier grade to make that connection into the state park. With that quick overview, myself or Jennifer Fink are available for any questions you might have, as well as a proposed motion for you to consider should you want to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? Not seeing any questions. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Council President Walsh.
Thank you. I move to authorize the mayor to execute a purchase and sale agreement and other documents necessary to purchase the property located at 10XX Sunrise Place Southwest, also known as King County Tax Parcel 3324069058 from Squaw Mountain Estates LLC for the amount of $2.5 million plus closing costs.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Don't know why it keeps going on. I do have a question for the administration. So there was some very interesting information that was presented in the public portion of the meeting tonight that is not part of the package. How does that information get shared with the public?
We could either amend the agenda packet
Okay.
and/or do a news item at the appropriate time so the community is aware
That's
that this
great.
is moving forward.
That's great. Thank you very much. So there being no further business, we are adjourned this evening at 8:27 PM.